Some time ago we showed you this guy. This is the Tara Aerospace TM9X. Really nice pistol with a very low bore axis, kind of sits in the hand like a Steyr would. Everything else feels kind of Glockish. What makes it unique though is it's got a double action with very short for repeat, but it's a double action pull every time, effectively serving as your safety. Good idea for law enforcement, military, places where there's minimal training, or for citizens that realize just how stressed they can get in a defensive situation. This TM9X, however, is not their earliest pistol. Before that, Tara had another venture, but we saw it kind of disappear from the market, or rather it never hit the US market for a couple reasons that you'll see. I got my hands on one of these, and that's what we're going to take a look at coming up next on GBGuns. If you go back and take a look at the tabletop of the TM9X, you'll see that a lot of things are similar, some things are different. This logo here obviously had to change. As you can imagine, there's another company that might have an issue with this. I think adding insult to injury, as I understand it, some of the engineers for Tara worked at Glock before. Tara, if you didn't know, is a river in the beautiful, beautiful country of Montenegro. Place I got to visit back when I was stationed in Europe, and I loved it there. A little tough to get around because it's a whole lot of mountains, but gorgeous place. And in a little tiny town of about 3,000 people, Tara Aerospace exists, where they are a NATO manufacturer for stuff like flares, the type that aircraft use to defeat heat-seeking missiles, ejection seats, all kinds of higher level military hardware made for NATO forces. So this is not just a nobody. They are maybe unheard of for US civilian market, but in the NATO and military sphere they do make other stuff. This pistol is the TM9. It's an earlier version of the TM9X, and when I was trying to research and learn more about this, all I could find were a few European videos on the TM9, not all of them in languages that I understood. So I'm excited to have my hands on one simply for collector's sake. Only a few of these, as I understand it, made it into the US. Century Arms was looking at importing them, and then it stopped. Now we have Tara Tactical USA, which is who's bringing the TM9Xs. This is kind of a glimpse back at what could have been in an earlier model. The case, as you can see, is just like the TM9X comes in. It is missing the extra back straps that should be with this gun. I take it that's just kind of what happens when you find a collector piece. And our manual is up top. We've got a nice padded, the case is really nice. Padded place to put your paperwork. Speaking of which, as always, we're going to take a look at the manual. So how does this older manual look? And by the way, there's an NSN there. Those of you fellow veterans or current service members recognize what that means. That means this is something that can be ordered within the supply chain. So as we glimpse back in the past at their older manual, we've got the obligatory warnings. Speaking of warnings, just a random note, I have heard that living is the leading cause of death. Maybe that's something that needs to be included in these mandated warnings as well. One of the things that it talks about is the DARE trigger system. That's that double action that I was showing you, and you'll learn more about that when we hit the range. Here are the specs. For those of you that want to know it, you can pause there, head over to Google, and translate that into something a little more American friendly. We have renderings, complete breakdown of the pistol, and something that I thought is kind of cool and neat about these. I've only seen it in Grand Power pistols until Sig Sauer, of course, made it very popular. The idea of this steel chassis here. I'll show you that when we take the gun apart. Shows you all your lubrication points, which is excellent. And then we have photos for the rest of the explanations. All of it's pretty clear, pretty plain, comes out in pretty good English. Other than that, we have our federally mandated trigger lock, a spare magazine. These magazines are different than what's on the TM9X. We'll see if they're cross-compatible. The cuts appear to be the same, but I thought it was interesting. These are kind of a phosphate and have witness windows for all 17 rounds, odds on one side, evens on the other. We'll get this stuff out of the way and we'll take a look at the gun. To look back in time and see how the TM9 has changed, We still have our ambi mag release. There's definitely some play on the far side. And there's that different magazine. We've got the TM9X here to compare against. No play on the mag release, nice and firm. And the newer mags have this nice coating, witness windows on the back. But putting the guns side by side really gives us a chance to see where things have changed. You can see the newer slide has a bit of a lightning cut and style cut with this angle here, and also front serrations. We've got a texture pad up here, whereas we did not on the older TM9, and the texture of the grip has changed quite a bit. We'll shoot this again, but I do believe that both Ms. T and I liked the texture on this as applying some grip without necessarily trying to exfoliate your hand. This is more of a traditional ribbing style, if you will. Coming over to the other side, one of the differences that I noticed right away was the slide markings. On this we've got, it's rather faint, you get the light on there, Tara and Crna Gora. Crna Gora is Montenegrin or Serbian for Black Mountains, which means Montenegro. That's how you say Montenegro in Montenegrin, or in Serbian rather, Crna Gora. Whereas on the 9X, we've got the 9X and Tara Aerospace. No real markings there. We also have on here the importer marked on the frame, whereas this guy, the older one, we did not. So some slight changes there. I did notice too that the trigger has improved. So the concept on these triggers is it's a double action. You've got spring to pull against immediately. This comes back fairly smoothly. It breaks all the way at the very end. Then you reset. It's right there. Gives you a little more pull again before it breaks. But it's a long, smooth double action. On this older TM9, the trigger looks to be about the same. In fact, yes, it is the same. Just had to verify it. You guys are exploring this as I do. The spring pressure begins immediately, and it's rather firm, with once again that break happening all the way at the end. I really got to flex my hand to shoot it. That wasn't the reset. There it is. That's something I noticed with this while I was in the shop, is it's not always going back into battery for some reason. So our break and our reset there. Seems like a little more travel, maybe about the same. But otherwise, we've got plenty of rail space up front. We have texture on the front of the trigger guard for the two-handed grip style. Decent radius under here. What I like is that this corner here is smooth. That's the corner that gives you Glock knuckle. If you've shot a lot of Glocks, you know what I'm talking about. See our texturing on the front, and we do have a gap there to facilitate gripping and ripping should you have issue getting the magazine out. See if the new mags fit. They do not. Interesting. Fit with the slide back? Nope. So there has been a slight change in the magazines. It's kind of a bummer. I was hoping I'd have more mags. We do have this pin back here. This actually is a tool, which when you pull it out, it becomes your push pin, or your rod, if you will, to be able to knock out that pin to change the back straps. Unfortunately, mine did not come with the other back straps. Slide to frame fit is very tight up front. A little bit of side to side in the back. And there's the rear texture. Notice as well the sights have been improved. The newer one on the right, the dots are much brighter, easier to pick up. Next we'll field strip the TM9 and take a look inside the gun. Field stripping this is going to look very familiar for anyone that's handled a Smith & Wesson gun. We've got a takedown lever there. We're going to lock the slide to the rear and rotate this lever down. Another thought I just had in handling these two side by side, no need to pull the trigger, nice for disassembly, is the polymer feels different and the coating on the slide feels thinner. So in several ways the TM9X that's currently on the market is an upgrade from this. Looking inside, we can see we've got our steel chassis in there. Those chassis are great because it helps give you a consistent trigger pull, even when it's a long, heavy one like this double action only, so to speak, or that's kind of how it feels. the pins, when they're pulled against, are sitting inside of steel instead of polymer. And so there's less room for stuff to get worn out, and helps keep things more consistent over time. You can see the way this works. This ledge back here is going to pull on the striker all the way to the end and then slip and let go. At least that's my assumption of it. We also have our safety bar there that pops up. Field stripping the slide is just like any other Browning tilting barrel action. Pop out our recoil assembly, which is a flat spring on a polymer guide rod. Then we tap our barrel to unlock it, bring it down a little bit so it can come up and out. A nicely polished feed ramp there. And give you a look inside the slide. Slide's fairly clean. This gun certainly has been fired a couple times, but everything seems in order. I don't like how it's struggling to go back into battery. We'll have to see if that's something that just breaks in over time. The barrel has a nice rich gray coating to it. I'm not sure what it is, but it was the same thing that's on the TM9X. And now we'll check for chamber fitment, as always, using a box of nozzle ammunition. Stuff's the most consistent ammo I've tested. That goes back to my days of doing ammo tests. I ran 65 different defensive loads through 9mm handguns and into gel just to see how stuff went. Also did some chronoing, things like that, and this nozzle has always been perfect. As I drop it in the chamber, what we're going to be listening for is a nice clunk, like that. Check to see if it can rotate, which it does. There's no burrs in there. And then in looking for chamber support, anything beyond that lower fold or that lower shoulder on the brass that is exposed is unsupported. And you can see here that unlike the original Glock design, this is fully supported. That's important and good to know in case you're going to run any ammunition that might have questionable brass. So that includes reloads, hot loads, maybe some aluminum. Essentially, whatever's not supported inside the chamber, when the case wants to rupture, is going to head out into your hand versus down the barrel. So having a fully supported barrel like this is just a nice little bit of extra safety. It would stand to reason that you'd get higher velocities as well, because you're getting more force being put out the barrel than into swelling the brass. But I don't know, that's probably only a couple feet per second. I'm sure one of you has tested it and can let me know. Reassembly, as you saw, was just the inverse of disassembly. Get everything back together in a quick functions check. Pretty easy to do since there's no safeties to deal with, and it's the same double action trigger every single time. Some people are afraid of that and think it's a downfall. I can say that it certainly makes just having fun at the range maybe a little more challenging. I don't mind the safety aspect of it for a carry gun, especially a duty gun. Think about most law enforcement and military training with a pistol is not high priority. They've got a lot of other things to do before they work on firearms. And so what ends up happening is at the most stressful moments of their service time, they're pulling out their gun. And that's why light, short triggers, although they certainly have their place, are not really something for duty use, in my opinion. When we get this out to the range, we're going to give it our standard battery of tests. That includes cold shot first impressions, our very first shots out of the gun, a full mag plus one test these magazines, especially bummer that the newer 9X mags don't work in it. Then we'll do our trademark what's for dinner test. We'll try sights and trigger control, could be a challenge on this double action, on our spinner, then give you some practical accuracy before our concluding thoughts from two shooters, myself and Miss Tia, representing two different backgrounds, two different tastes, and two different hand sizes. For me, this feels pretty darn comfortable. It's about Glock 17 size, and so as you can see, I don't have to worry about smashing a pinky when inserting a magazine because I've got all of my hand on the gun itself. That mag release feeling a little lazy. I wonder if this is a fluke or if this is the way the models were. That's kind of the downfall in doing historical reviews like this, is who knows how old this gun is, who knows if it was of standard or not. It's certainly not the same grade and doesn't feel as nicely done as the current TM9Xs. I'll have links for those videos in case you guys missed those and didn't see this thing, but this was a surprisingly nice shooter and is one of Miss Tia's favorites, actually. We'll see you on the range. Thanks for watching.